And welcome to another video from CodeReviewIo. This is Mustafa Rumi. So today we will talk about the Firebase remote config. If you don't know what Firebase remote config is actually the cloud service that Firebase provides to give you an easy way and simple way to update your app and also all the preferences of your app and the appearance of your app, and it will be directly published in the same time. So if you see the key capabilities here, we see that the quickly changes. So whenever you publish your changes in the Firebase remote config, then you will see directly in the app. Also we have the customization for the app for a couple segments, depends on the user pace, and also we can run the A/B testing, which is another services from Firebase, to see if for a specific, let's say for a specific remote config, is it going well or not. So you can follow actually the user behavior on that config before you run out for whole users. So that's Firebase. We will use Flutter in this case. We will integrate the Firebase remote config. First of all, you have to create a Firebase account. You can put, and then you go to create a project. You can put any name that you want, depends to your project name, and continue here. If you want to see the A/B testing or you want to use the A/B testing, then you have to make this enabled, and then you can select your account, add Firebase project, and then I exceeded the max projects here. Already created an app called the demo remote config. You see here I already installed 2 apps in iOS also. So we have already 2 apps. If we go to remote config here, we can see we can create our remote config. So I already created 2 conditions. One is for the main screen, and the other one is just for show model. So which is actually here I put 2 types. So here you see the main screen is type of JSON data, and the show model is type of Boolean true or false. That's to test out all the conditions. So normally if you want to create a new one, you for example, let me click cancel, add parameters. So you can add the param that you want. You give it the description for anything, and then you give it default value. So when you click here, you can make a JSON, or you can make it like a true false in case of Boolean, either the true false or JSON data. What's important here that you need to put a condition. So here you have to create a conditional value, and that conditional value is what you want to do with depends on this config. So if I take for example the update model, so it will take the update model, and update model is a conditional value. When you click on update, we see that it will check the percentage. We have a couple config here. You can specify the platform, the languages, the region, so you can target users that for specific languages or platforms or the country regions. But what I do mostly is that depending on the user random percentile, which means that if for max more than like you can put the value here, but I already keep it 0, which means that for 100% of for all the users. Now you can create more conditional values. What I would suggest that you always create a development value, which is that used for debugging, and another value which used in the production. So to keep it separate, and you know what you're trying to do, because you don't want to change the value or the conditional value here in the production just of the case of debugging. So always better to create two values, one for debug and one for the production. So these are my configs. So let's go through it. So I have my main screen condition and main screen. This is the let's say the param that we want to access. So this is mostly is the param. And then if I want to access inside, so we can this will be the JSON data, and then I can access anything inside the JSON data. And that's also be the same. So this is the param, and then I know this is a boolean, so it return true or false, so I can see inside my app. Now that's in, let's say, in nutshell how you let's say how you create your remote config. So now we create a new project, and we called it I called it Firebase remote config, or Flutter Firebase remote config. And then we need two packages actually to install. The first is called the Firebase core, which is the package that we can access to all the Firebase, most of the Firebase services. And then we need more specific with Firebase remote config, and we see the Firebase Flutter will get these packages. So now it's this one will create a new, in the lib directory, it will create generated a plugin registration. And this is well where the Firebase we try to register the app, and it says here do not do edit for this file. So do not move it, do not edit, so just keep it like it is. Now we can go to the main screen, and then we can start programmatically do these changes. First, we create a file called remote config service, or you can call it whatever you want, and then we try to do some import. So we import Dart async to have sync data, and then we import the Firebase config and also the Firebase core, and also a couple services that we need later. And then we create a class called remote config service, and here we put some string controllers to follow the error in the Firebase when we trying to fetch the data from the remote config. And this error will be the stream, so we will have a stream getter and stream controller, and then we will create a new function called set remote config. So set remote config should be called, and this will return should return also the future of the remote config data. Now we will try to initialize the app first. So this is where we called a Firebase initialize the app, and then we create a new variable. Here we get the instance of the remote config, and then we try to set config settings. So the remote config settings needs to set before for how long we will want to fetch the data. So this will take the remote config settings with fetch timeout. We put the seconds for 200, and then the minimum fetch interval, it will be every 30 minutes. So like every half an hour, it will try to fetch the data again. And then we try to get this instance, and we set the defaults. Here where we define our all the remote config, and then we set the values in it. So in case of this is what's called the fallback. So actually in case of the remote config is not couldn't fetched, or for any reason, this is the fallback to the remote config. And then you can see how the remote config data, because I already said, like in the remote config, the show model is true or false, and the main screen it will be a JSON data, so it will be mapping of string and dynamic. So where we say the title, for example, here I said demo, the show ad is false, and the icon size is 10. Now in the end, we put the remote config value with null, and then we put the value source as a value static to be returned always, and then we return the remote config as an end. Now we will make another method, and this method indeed needed in case of you want explicitly added or fetch the data at the same time. So here where we define a button, like for example, and then you click on it and you just need to fetch the latest data. In this case, we will create this function or method, and then we pass the Firebase remote config for it, and then it will be future. So we will try to use try catch because it kind of here it will throw an error in case of there is if couldn't fetch any data. So here I will take the remote config, set config settings as like here. So we set the remote config. The difference here, we need to put the duration as 10 seconds, where this one is different as seconds. So I don't know for you, but I put just 10 seconds. You can put 1 second, 2 seconds, I don't know. But you need to check, you need to be careful with that, because we will have a throttling data if you do try to fetch multiple times in less time. And then we put the minimum fetch interval as a 0. And because why we want it to 0, because we will not have the same interval to fetch it again, so it's just one time. And then we will say fetch and activate, and you can see what fetch and activate is from Firebase to activate the remote config. And then in the catch we will have couple platform exception here, and then you can use the stream controller in above to add the value. Or what you can do actually, especially here, you can try to do it this again. But for me, so for example, I put only that I put only this as an error to add it to the stream, and then for the catch it will be the same. I think that's it. So I don't have any. We don't have anything. We already done for the remote config in the service. Now we will go to the main screen. So in the main Dart, I already removed most of the the placeholder what comes in the app. So we keep the main like this. So first we initialized, we put the widget Flutter binding to ensure the initialized, which means that we need to make sure that Firebase already initialized here. And then we can run the app. My app is a stateful widget. And then inside the stateful widget, we will define a remote config service. And then the remote config is type of remote config service, that the one we have created. And inside the init, we can define and we can initialize it as a remote config service. So in the build here, there is not that much there is not that much that we need. This is all the placeholder. The only thing that when we try to build the home, we put the future builder. That's why, because we have a remote config service. The remote config service, when we set the remote config, it will return future of remote config, and the builder, it will take the context and with the snapshot with the remote config data. And here we will check if the snapshot connection state is type of waiting. Here where we show loading icon. And then if we have the data, then we will go to the home page. Otherwise, we will show the error page where we send the error of the stream that we already defined. So I think that's it. That's most of it. Now you have all the data will be returned to the home page. All what you can do is just to handle the data. So we have the remote config that will be passed to the constructor, and we have the surface. So both they are. So this is type of, if you put here the mouse, it's type of async snapshot remote config, which means that this one is type of remote config. And then when we define it here, and this will move also the remote surface here. And what we can do is that we just build the widgets. So we have the data, we can just build the widgets. So what I did actually, I put the center here, I put the text, and then I put, this is the text actually static, but this font size of this text, it will be from the remote config. So I can control from Firebase, control the size of this text. It's the same what in the app bar here. So the app bar here we already defined. Let's make this in the like this. So we already defined the let's see, the upper title. It will be demo, while it will check this of them from remote config. Let me this. And now what it will happen, that this one, it will come from the remote config Firebase, and we can make a getter here. So we know already that the data, it will come from the instance that passed, and we get the string as a main screen because we already said main screen and then title. So it's a JSON data, so we can get this. What you can do is actually create a class to identify the types here for the main screen, but actually for the sake of this video I just use it like this, and you just need to wrap it with JSON decode because we know it's already JSON data. And that will be also the same for the size. The size, it will take the JSON decode and then send the main screen, and then with icon size. And you need always to, I think it's better to move it to double, because we know the size, the font size is taken double, and so you need to convert it in case of, even if this double, so you need to convert it. I think so that mostly is it. So the text, it will be the font size of this text will be from the remote config, the title from the remote config, and then we have the floating action. The floating action is where we define the fetching of the data. So this is where we say on a pressed, we take the remote config surface and we try to force the fetching data. And we send the remote config data, which is to it. Actually, it's not data, just a remote config. It's better to call it like this. And but before that, we already put a condition. So this condition is take if the remote config data, and we here we use get boolean, and then we say show model. So this value we can trigger it also. And by the way, is this get bool or also get string, or they are all defined for you in the remote config data. So if you try to put if you try to put this here and we say get, you see there is get all, and which mapping the string and the remote config data values, and then get bool, get double, get integer, get string, and get value. So actually I didn't use you cannot use this get integer or get double if you have a JSON data, and that's why I couldn't use it. So it's better to take the JSON data, decode it, and then convert it to double. And yeah, so if the show model, so here defined as a default value false, but if the show model is true, then it will show the floating action, and then we can force, when we click on it or press on it, we can force the fetching data of the remote config. And yeah, actually that's it. So now we can move to the demo. We can see already that this is my title. So you see here, or actually it's better here. So this is the title. The app title is Fire remote config app, while it's the default is demo, so it doesn't trigger the Firebase, we know already. Also we see the size of this text is already taken from Firebase remote config, while as the default is 10. And then we already see the floating action, which means that I also put the size as the same size of this, so that's why you see the icon is big. And so we see the floating action, which means that the button here is true from the remote config Firebase. And now let me check this, use this one in here a bit. So you see this is the title, Fire remote config app, show add is true, and then icon size. So we see already, and then we can see the default value is demo app, which is not the same as here, so we know already the Firebase is already fetched. So the remote config is very great. I'm actually using it in real life project with the rating, because use it for specific people to enable the rating or not. So it's really a nice feature from Firebase. I know it's been old, like for like 2 years or 3 years, but it's really cool feature. And yeah, I think that's it. If you have any questions, just post it in the comments below. I try to answer as much as I can. And while you are there, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and see you soon.